Peace everyone, this is my little chart I made because I saw some false teaching on the end times. As we know, end times is a false doctrine if you've looked into it. Basically, the interesting features around this area, if you look at, we have here the cross of Christ. Okay, let me go through it. Basically, on my chart I've got each week being 1,000 years. Okay, this is the mystery. We're dealing with an allegory of a week. Okay, so I have 10 weeks at the bottom, which basically pertains to prophetic revelation in this book. Okay. So, for example, we start off with Adam in the beginning of time, week 1. So 1,000 years. We come into week 2, the second 1,000 years. We have the flood, which occurred approximately around 1,700 years after the creation, according to the genealogy in Genesis. Then we have from the flood to the cross. Okay, and this time period here is what's referred to as the Great 5.5 days. But obviously we're dealing in weeks, so you could say the 5.5 weeks. So it's basically the 5.5 days is 5,500 years. So right in the middle of this block of here, I've put down the cross. So from Adam, as it says, from Adam to Christ, death reigned. Then we have the cross, and what the cross did was it brought in a time period called the last days. Now, what your fake pastor theologian will tell you is the last days are a literal 3.5 year time period prior to the second coming. So on their chart they'll write the church being people being brought in from the Gentiles into the church, which it is, but then they'll have this little 3.5 year period which they'll call the end times, and then they'll have the rapture at the second coming. Now, if we look at, I've written Antichrist 42 months last days. Now, if you look in the scripture, the key chapters here, what we're dealing with are Matthew 24 and 25, and Christ references the book of Daniel, the abomination of desolation. And he says, from the time when the daily sacrifices cease, the 42 months will begin. That's what he basically says. But they use, instead of the 42 months, they use a period of days which actually does equate to 42 months. If you want to type that, go and type that in. So this is called also the Great Tribulation. Right, now, there was an unknown theologian who wrote some commentaries on the prophets in the Dead Sea Scrolls. They came to the same conclusion, that the last days were going to be for a long period of time. On my chart, I've got them down here from 5,500 years to 7,500 years. 5,500 years to 7,500 years. That takes you into the 8th week, okay? And this is the second comment. Now we're basically right here in our point of time. If you think about it, 2033 would make it 2,000 years from the cross. And from what I understand from a prophet named Baruch, there's going to be two weeks of the last days, i.e. 2,000 years of these last days where Antichrist reigns. Okay. Then what happens here, as we know from the book of Revelation, Satan's chained and thrown into hell. The plagues, very similar to the ones that hit Egypt, will strike the earth, and the angels will overcome the kings of this earth and bind them. And this is called in Enoch, it's called the 8th week, as I've said, and it says, sinners are delivered into the hands of the righteous. The house of the great king is built in glory forever. So we have then what's known as the Millenial reign, famously. This is the 1,000 years where Christ reigns with the saints, and it's the first resurrection of the dead being exclusively the saints of Christ who fell asleep in these last days, and also those whose saints were from Adam to the cross. They're all raised from the dead during this millennial reign. Now, after this it gets slightly cloudy. You have, at the end of the millennial reign, you have Satan's loosed, and this is detailed in the book of Revelation, which is during the time of the 9th week, which is here. He goes out to deceive the nations, as it's written, and they come against the saints, and it's described that fire comes down from heaven and consumes them. So this is the 9th week. So if we read what Enoch says about the 9th week, it says, righteous judgment revealed to the whole world. All works of the godless vanish. So that's akin to the judgment that we see in the book of Revelation. The world written down for destruction, mankind looks to the path of uprightness. Okay, that's the 9th week, the ninth millennium, basically. So we're going beyond. That's the millennium beyond the millennium, if you get what I mean. So the 10th week is the great eternal judgment. Now this is what's written in the book of Revelation as the second resurrection of the dead, which is all the souls, the ones who died in the sea, all good and bad, so-called, are brought to the great eternal judgment in the 10th week, which we have here, also called the great white throne judgment. And this also is when the new heaven and the new earth will be made, and we will have obviously the lake of fire judgment, when those who are not written, those names that are not written in the Lamb's book of life, are thrown into the lake of fire. Then we have eternity, many weeks, countless. And this is basically my chart that from scriptures I've come to understand. So if anybody pulls out these fake end time charts with the literal end times period of 3.5 years, this is garbage. This is the correct chart from the scriptures.